There's a fierce national debate right now, as everybody knows in this room, about whether it's really in our national interest to be in Afghanistan. What there doesn't seem to be as much a debate about, at least from what I'm reading, is what are the assumptions that are underlying our strategy? How are they formulated? How accurate they are? What's the basis for them? And I was wondering if you gentlemen could comment about some of these assumptions. For instance, that Pakistan will ultimately be infiltrated by the Taliban if they prevail, that the Taliban is not as, that they're more welcomed by the Afghan people, which the Admiral referenced. But I wonder about some of the assumptions that underlie the commitment of human and financial resources to that endeavor versus some of the other alternatives.
Jim?
We know a good deal about the process by which these assumptions are formed and articulated in the meetings with the President. They had almost a dozen, maybe 10 meetings of the National Security Group to talk about the surge and other aspects, and we were told in great detail about how crisp the meetings were and the President's very laudatory questioning and making people state their views so that nobody could leave and said that their view was never heard, they didn't have a thing to say. It's a lot less clear exactly whether those assumptions are a joint product, if I can say, because we do know that there were differing views about whether or not we should try to keep a restricted footprint or try to go in with the surge, and the President, at the end of the day, to some extent split the difference, a little heavier on the McChrystal side than on the Biden side. But I think the basic assumption is it would be a disaster to be seen to be pulling out, to be cutting and running. I think that's a basic assumption. So therefore, we are there for a while. We have to manage our presence there to meet these two contradictory messages that I referred to a moment ago. We're not staying, but we're not leaving. And there's a lot of tension between those two messages, and it takes a lot of time and effort to balance that. In terms of the assumptions about Pakistan, yes, I think one of the things that this administration has done fairly well is to articulate the importance of Pakistan, and Mullen did it again today here in saying that we can't really solve the Afghan problem if we don't get full cooperation from the Pakistanis. And we are getting a good deal more cooperation, pretty much still in terms that allow the Pakistanis to give us things to buy them time. They're also in the time-buying game. I mean, everybody involved in this is in the time-buying game. But I think the President has done a good job of forcing everybody to articulate their assumptions so he can examine them, then make the decisions. I'm just not clear exactly where the weight is on each and every point. I don't know if that's responsive to your question or not, but that's about as good as I can do, I think.
Just that the outcomes that we fear are going to happen, why are those outcomes assumed to be the case?
Thanks.
What is the reasoning behind it, and what facts support the reasoning?
A lot of course, based on intelligence, probably too much. I think one of the things we see in this case of the Nigerian is that there was a lot of information out there that wasn't highly classified, and therefore might not have been taken as seriously as it should have been. So it's clear that there was a difference of view, and I think there probably still is, and it shifts from time to time, over whether or not the Taliban itself represents a direct threat to the United States. And therefore, we are required to stay in Afghanistan come what may. I think there are people who were involved in the debate who believe that. I don't think that was the consensus judgment by the President. I think there is going to be, as part of this new effort, a concerted effort to peel off the Taliban, to not make peace with, but to develop perhaps a live and let live in some of the provinces with the Taliban if we are convinced they will prevent al-Qaeda from returning. I guess the key question is, do you believe that if the Taliban becomes, again, an even more important influence and going to the point of taking over Afghanistan, does that mean that al-Qaeda will then come back? That's one of the assumptions. You can say yes or no, and you've got your assumption there. I think the assumption by the administration is that we can't risk the Taliban coming back, because it is still possible that they will invite al-Qaeda back in, that they are in fact al-Qaeda in another guise. I tend toward that view, so I give that view the prominence. But it's quite possible that that could change as we have more experience in trying to establish some kind of modus vivendi with the Taliban.
Jim, let me just close by asking you one last question. Don Rumsfeld made a famous distinction between known unknowns and unknown unknowns. I'm not going to ask you about unknown unknowns, but I do want to ask you, since this is our opening event of 2010, as you look out over the course of this year, what among the panoply of known unknowns that could be hitting the headlines over the course of this year in the part of the world we're focused on, which of those do you think are rise to the top of the list?
One that springs to my mind right away that I don't think we know nearly enough about is what is going to happen in Egypt. If you look at what happened yesterday on the Gaza frontier, and the killing of an Egyptian security officer by fire from Gaza, and the great turmoil that's going on there, and if you look at the age of Hosni Mubarak, and you look at the political uncertainty around a succession there, I think Egypt is a huge known unknown, and could have upheaval there could have an enormous influence. The other one, of course, is more known than that, and that is Iran. How close are they? What red lines have the Israelis drawn? How close? How well do the Iranians understand those red lines? And there is some hope, I think, among people that they do see most of them. But Iran is the other great one.